Looking at the reach of your stroke, I'll play it in regular time, and as you can see, just the front view. But if we slow it down just a little bit, there's some things that I notice that you're doing, and just to correct, you don't want to let your elbow drop below your hand. As you can see right here, you're beginning to see your elbow drop, which is obviously you want to keep it up a little bit. And to help correct that, you do want to keep your hand closer to the surface, around, you know, less than 4 inches, 4 to 6 inches. But as you can see, you have it, you know, you want to keep it right around there, and then you continue downward. You have this big gap, you know, right around there, which you don't want. And you continue forward, and then your hand drops down. So right here, you want to keep your hand around 4 to 6 inches, you know, or less, closer to the surface, and then begin your pull and finish. Looking at the pull and finish of your stroke, remember it is the most powerful part of the stroke. You also want to make sure that you're going to catch water by letting your elbow pop up. As we look at the footage, I'll let it play slowly, then just stop it. Looking at your front angle, you'll notice that you'll catch more water, but if you let your elbow float up or pop up, and while keeping your fingers angled towards the bottom of the pool, you have a straight arm pull, and you want to have a little bit more bend in your elbow. You can look again. You see you don't want to let any part of your arm cross the center line of your body. And moving on again. Looking at your fingertips, very good that you have a slight gap in between your fingers. You don't want to have too much. Just remember, relax your fingers under your water, and you want to just keep that small gap between each finger. If you want to, you know, test it out as to how much space you want to have in your hands, basically stick your hand outside the car when you're driving, and then play with, you know, how wide or how small the gap is, and you can actually kind of tell what's going to create more drag or what's going to create more force, having you go forward in the water. And then the last thing I have for your pull and finish is you want to have a slight bend in your wrist. You don't want to have your hand completely forward. Some coaches may argue this, but if you consider and you look at the great swimmers, they have a slight bend in the wrist because they want to immediately start their next stroke, and that helps. First, starting with your right arm, as you can see, now this is slowed down quite a bit. We're looking at the first arrow. Your arm is staying out there while your left arm is continually moving forward. However, if you look at your left arm, you're already starting your pullback, and your right arm's coming forward. Again, we'll look at that slowly. Your right arm staying, just hanging out, and then it starts the recovery. So you want to make that motion completely fluid. It'll make you extremely efficient. Looking now at the second arrow that's drawn, you can look and see where your arm is coming out of the water. You have that splash, and that's creating drag for you. You want to make that more effortless by keeping your elbow coming out first and just letting your hand swing wide and come out of the water. And as we continue forward again, you see where your right arm enters the water. It's pretty much at your head, and you really want it to enter where the bottom arrow is currently, a little bit farther out, because if you look where your elbow is, you're creating a splash, and that's going to create drag. You would rather your arm enter out forward and your hand coming in forward first, and then the arm just kind of glides into the water rather than what looks like you're plopping it into the water. Looking at your body position, you can see that when you're swimming, you roll to over 45 degrees, and you want to stay again below 45. And then as your right arm comes forward, you begin to come back again, just to keep that in mind. Next thing I've noticed is if you look at the water line, you want to keep it at the center of your head, and it's almost at the beginning of the forehead and where your hairline would start. So you want to keep your head down slightly more, which will enable your hips to come up and less drag. As you can see, your head, I know you're coming up for a breath, but as you look at where the water line is, it's still very closer to your forehead. Again, keep your head down, and that should correct it. Looking at your footage, we're dealing with the legs and kicking. You don't obviously want to kick too much, but not enough kicking will cause drag and let your hips sag a little bit, which is a problem, especially in open water. So looking at your kick, I've only noticed about 4 things that I think would be greatly increase your speed and efficiency in the water. The first thing is that heels really do indicate balance where you are in the water. Generally, you want to see a slight break of the water with your heels coming out, which is a good indication of proper balance. But you want to make sure that you're not doing this so your heels aren't coming out of the water because you're bending your knees. It has to be a fluid motion that your heels slightly come out of the water because of your hip-driven kick. Moving on to the second thing I noticed was your continued kick has... You want to have a continued kick when you're swimming. Your stroke has a slight pause. Even though I've slowed this down, you can see your legs don't really do anything, and then when you put your hand back in the water, you're back to kicking again. And you just want to make sure that you have a quicker kick. To do that, you might want to focus on kicking at a 4-beat kick or a 6-beat kick. So for every stroke, you take three kicks, left, right, left with your feet. In a 4-beat kick, you want to have, for every stroke, you're kicking twice. Moving on towards, I also noticed that you have a slight bend in the knee, because if you look at your left leg here, you notice that your left leg doesn't really move too much. You can see that bend in the knee, and you want to keep it flat, if that makes any sense. And then the last thing I just wanted to point out, and it's slightly noticeable, but I think once you fix your balance in the water, that'll help. But looking at your heels, you actually cross your legs when you're kicking. I don't know if you realize that, but you're slightly crossing the legs. And, that's not a bad thing, however, because having your feet pigeon-toed is always good, slightly turn inward. But crossing your legs, then you want to keep your legs as straight as possible.